Hey, you like that, Jimmy?
I like that. That's it. I might break into a little rap here.
Oh, how about this? We are at the Bass Pro Shops booth here, and this is Championship Sunday here, Bassmaster Classic, and we are with Mr. Jimmy Houston, legendary angler, legendary name. He rolls up in his sunglasses, looking fresh as can be. Jimmy, we really appreciate you hopping on the podcast here today.
Oh, it's great to be here. This is a great place to be. This is a place to be right now at the Bassmaster Classic, Sunday afternoon. The guys out there fishing. And you know, there's only really a handful of them right now, this stage of the game, it's got a chance to win.
Yeah.
But every person is trying to just move up one more spot.
Yep.
And you know, when you finish last out there today, you still done great. You still done great. But just to be one more spot up, that's what even somebody that I think what was fishing today, 25?
Top 25.
Top 25. Nobody wants to be 25th today. 24th is much better.
They're going for it.
Oh, yeah. They're working just as hard now as they did when they started out the first day of the Classic.
Jimmy, talk a little bit about, so this is your home state of Oklahoma.
It is.
Yep. And seeing all the awesome fans out here, not only in the Bass Pro booth, but this whole expo here. Back when you started fishing, however long ago, decades and decades ago, did you ever think the sport of bass fishing would be this big?
You know, Chris, that's a great question because, no, I had no idea. And, I'm often asked, I fished my first BASS tournament in 1968.
Wow.
Okay, I know that's before most of y'all were born.
Yeah.
But 1968, Eufaula, Alabama, it was either the second or the third tournament that Ray Scott ever had. And I met Ray Scott before he ever had a tournament. My dad owned a resort on Lake Tenkiller. And my buddy Don Butler, who is here in Tulsa, Don Butler actually won a Bassmaster Classic. And Don brought Ray Scott down to my house. Ray Scott is the founder of BASS, and Ray's gone on to be with the Lord right now. But he started all of this dream. Now, we had bass tournaments before then.
Sure.
We fished some other organizations, Project Sports Incorporated, World Series of Sports Fishing. I fished that when I was a senior in college in 1966. Yeah.
Wow.
I told Roland Martin I fished my first tournament when senior in college, and Roland went, "You went to college?" And Roland went to college too, and that shocked me. So there we are. But Ray Scott came in my dad's store before they ever had a tournament. First tournament was Beaver Lake, which is not far from here, and he sold my dad a $10 membership in the Bass Angler Sportsman Society, BASS. There were no memberships. You didn't get a magazine, you get nothing. And I remember my dad, that was a long time ago, and he had a cash register in the store that you hit a certain button and you pulled a lever, and it went ding, and the cash drawer flew open, and you put money in and made people's change. I remember my dad said, "Well, I'll buy a membership in that." And he hit that little button and opened that and pulled a $10 bill. And gas was 28 cents a dollar. So $10 was a pretty good for a membership in an organization that was just in Ray Scott's mind. And we had no idea. And like I started to say, I get asked all the time, when did you turn pro? When did you turn? Like, you could tell me, Chris, the year that you turned professional.
Sure.
What year was that?
2011.
Dang, you realize that's about 100 years ago. That was 13 years ago. I have no idea because we didn't turn pro. We were fishing tournaments. And like I said, the first tournament, BASS, was the second or third tournament. Second was either Eufaula or Smith Lake, and the other one was the third one. I don't know which was which. But in 1968, but we were fishing tournaments and having a great time. We were competing with each other, having fun, competing against the fish, just like the pros do right now. Somewhere along the way, they started calling us professional fishermen. And I go, wow, we're professional fishermen? I didn't know that. And so it's kind of a cool deal. So I guess that, I don't know how long I've been a professional fisherman.
Wow.
But I know that I'm going to be one from now on. That's a pretty fun game to play.
So we're here at the Bassmaster Classic. You have never won a Bassmaster Classic. Hey, neither have I.
I hear that a lot as well.
Listen. You got legendary rolling.
He throws a dart right off the bat.
Yeah. Hey, this is the Bilge Podcast. We're known to do that, but you've never won the Classic. I've never won the Classic. You've won numerous, tour level events. How hard is it to win one of these? And I've got a secondary question to that. I've never won an Elite Series event. they're so hard to win. But mentally, how do you prep yourself to win an event this big, or an Elite Series event, or tour level event like that?
Well, let me tell you, and I'm going to throw another name out there while he's throwing daggers.
Yeah.
That Roland Martin has never won. My buddy Roland sitting right over there. We're getting ready to go fishing tomorrow. This time tomorrow, we will be ripping lips is what we'll be doing.
Awesome.
But another one of my buddies, a guy that I used to watch on television all the time when I was a kid growing up, Mr. Bill Dance. And Bill Dance has never won a classic also, so I'll go ahead and throw that in there.
Right.
And but I got to tell you, when we started fishing the Bassmaster Classic, and I fished, I don't even know how many, 15 or 20 of them, and Roland's fished like 100 Bassmaster Classics, but we had 300 people in the tournament. 300 people in the tournament. Of about probably 35 or 40 of them were locals. Many of them were guides that guided on the lakes we were fishing. And to make the Bassmaster Classic, you had to be in the top 24 for the year out of 300 fishermen. So it was really a big deal to try to make that classic. But honestly, once we got there, we wanted to win the tournament because it's just another tournament. And it paid $50,000 to win. But you know how much second place paid at those classics? That the first probably 5 or 10 or 15, not that many, but maybe at least the first 5, 6, 7, 8 classics we fished, second place paid $0.
Wow.
$0. You could get beat by 12 ounces, and you went from $50,000 to nothing.
You must have finished second place in one of those.
I finished up in the top in several of them. I don't know if I ever got second, but I finished fourth on the Ohio River in Louisville. Got beat by less than a pound by George Cochran. I lost a 4-pounder right at the boat. Should have easily won the tournament. Just messed it up. But when we started fishing those classics, I realized that there's 24 guys there, and they're all really, really good. They done beat 275 other fishermen throughout this year. So I never really worked that hard to try to win the classic. I tell you what I did, Chris, and it might be some good advice to some of the younger tournament fishermen. Ray Scott was smart enough to know that in order to make this a really big deal, you needed press. And there wasn't hardly any fishing shows back then. And I don't know the first year I fished it. I think it's 1975. The first year I fished all 6 tournaments. Wow. I ended up third that year in the Angler of the Year title. But what I did is we had every outdoor writer from every newspaper and every magazine in the United States of America there. And I thought, wow, this is a great place to let people know who Jimmy Houston is. So I spent my time at that classic really and truly, this is terrible to say, and you're going to think this is just an excuse because he didn't win. But I was really trying hard to win. Now, I'm not saying I wasn't doing that. But most of my effort at that classic was to make sure that I was meeting and visiting with every one of those outdoor riders. I was becoming friends with them. I was getting their cards. I would tell them we didn't have podcasts and great things like this. There was no social media. And I would tell them, hey, you need an article about something, you call me. And by the way, I know how to throw a spinnerbait. I'm pretty good with a plastic worm. I can work at topwater. You're writing a story about some of this. You call me. And so all of a sudden, I started showing up in all these newspapers and magazines and everything. And I didn't want a classic, but everybody'd say, that Jimmy Houston guy, boy, you talk to him about throwing a Zara spook. He can make that thing walk backwards.
Yeah.
I really can't, but I don't, surely I didn't tell anybody that I could.
Yeah.
I don't know how they got that idea. But that was my focus at those first tournaments for the first several years. And honestly, the most important thing to most of the fishermen, I can't speak for some of these younger guys now because I don't know all of them. Sure. I know a lot of the guys that fish in this tournament. My buddy Jason Christie, who I think was in 12th place yesterday, I've known Jason ever since he was born. He's a homeboy, lives down on Lake Tenkiller, and I fished against his dads and his granddad and his mama. Yeah. I mean, Jason used to fish tournaments with his mama because his dad and his uncles wouldn't carry him. They wouldn't carry him in a tournament. They were fishing him, so his mama would take him, and then Jason and his mama would win the tournament a lot of time. So, but I can't speak for the young guys about what their emphasis is. But for me in fishing those tournaments, and 1975 was the first time I got to fish all 6 of them, and I finished third in the Angler of the Year title. And a man named Roland Martin won that Angler of the Year title in 1975. A very dear friend of mine, Ricky Green, who qualified for the first 13 Bassmaster Classics, and Ricky's gone now. I spoke at his funeral, and I actually carried him to the grave. And Ricky Green finished second. I finished third for the year. And another man named Bill Dance finished fourth. And I told Ray Scott in 1975, I said, Ray, I'm going to win the BASS Angler of the Year title next year. And he said, are you trying to tell me you can beat all these guys? You can beat all these guys for the year? I said, I beat them all this year except Roland and Ricky. Yeah. And I did win the Angler of the Year in 76. And that's the first time I won it. I won again later on. But that was the only time I really tried really hard to win it. But that was our focus. People like Roland. Roland won it like 9 times. 9 times. The most any. It was Kevin Van Dam, I think, has won 6 or 7. My wife, Chris, won 7 in Bass and Gal. To win an Angler of the Year title, that's just one person a year gets to do that. So that was really my focus in tournaments. And, yeah, I would have loved to win a Bassmaster Classic, especially when it got up to $200,000 or $300,000. I tried a lot harder in those tournaments, I got to tell you. But really, I networked. And, you know, one of the things that this game, honestly, has always been to me, I've never considered myself a tournament fisherman. And that's why when people started calling me a professional fisherman, I thought, you got to be kidding. I'm not. I'm not a professional fisherman. But
you're a great promoter.
But what, you know, I started the television show because of Bill and because of Roland. Roland's been doing his 2 years longer than I have. Bill's been doing his 4 years longer. And the tournaments were just a fun thing to do. And if we won some money at it, that was a bonus. That was an extra deal. And all of my tournament career, and we fished tournaments for 54 years. So I don't know that I can not call myself a tournament fisherman, but I never really considered myself a tournament fisherman through all those years. I set the tournaments up and tried to make money at them. If I finished last place, I still wanted to make money at that tournament. So we had great sponsors, and we worked really, really hard for those sponsors. Bass Pro Shop and Ranger Boats, Mercury Motors, some of the sponsors that we have right now today, we had clear back there when we first started the television show, and we started getting sponsors for tournaments. We fished a lot of tournaments before anybody ever had a sponsor. I can remember when a man named John Fox, who had a television show, some of you older guys, called The American Angler, and I was on his show several times as a guest, came up to me at a tournament. This is before BASS. I fished my first tournament in 1966 when I was a senior in college. Yes, I did graduate from college. Roland can't believe that either. But in 1966, I can remember fishing a tournament on Lake Sam Rayburn, and John Fox, who had his television show called The American Angler, brought me up a handful of Mr. Twister worms, plastic worms. We had the straight ones, cream worms, back, and both those brands are still available. You can buy them today. And by the way, they're not made by my sponsor, Lucky Strike.
Right.
Before somebody gets on to me for that. But anyway, you could. He brought me these worms that had a little curly tail on them, and he gave me a whole handful of them, different colors. Gave me a whole handful. He said, "These are the most amazing things in the world. You need to try them." I said, "Wow, free worms! What a deal! This is wonderful." And so I thought, "Wow." And then somebody else told me, said, "You know, you ought to talk to them about a sponsorship." So I called them, and they paid me a little money every month. But here's the deal. I took that handful of worms, and I went back to Lake Tenkiller down there where we lived, and I gave a couple, 2 or 3 of those worms to everybody. Like if Chris was one of my buddies, I said, "Chris, here's a couple of worms. Try these worms, see what you think." And that's how marketing started in tournament fishing. I was doing things like that. Roland, Bill, some of the other older guys who was fishing those tournaments was giving away some of these free baits that they gave. And that was, you know, it was just, and these worms were probably like 59 cents a package for 10 of them.
Sure, but you were getting,
now they're 59 cents a piece, or $1 if you buy them from Gary. Yeah. But that's how promotion in tournaments started. And your original question was, did you ever think it'd get to this? Absolutely not. It was a big deal to get a handful of free worms.
It's truly amazing. And as you look all across this expo floor here, you see all these aspiring young professional anglers. Maybe a question for a lot of those guys, and I always wanted to ask you this: if you were to put it into percentages, and you briefly hit on it, what emphasis of marketing and promotion did you have over fishing itself, and explain the importance of that a little bit, because it sounds like it's a little bit more than 50-50.
99% promotion in the market and 1% fishing.
There you go. There you go.
And real quickly, some of you have to be a little bit older, but you can remember the lure company, Mann's Lure Company. My buddy Tom Mann, and it was the greatest marketer I've ever seen. He actually gave me a handful of Mann's jelly worms at that Eufaula, Alabama tournament. The first, I went down to his factory. Ray Scott took me down there, and he gave me these big 10-inch, 11-inch jelly worms. I'd never seen a worm that big. That was a snake to me, not a worm. And he gave me those, and I went out there, and I learned how to fish deep on Lake 10 Killer. I didn't know anything about fishing shallow until I got involved in bass fishing tournaments. And so I went out in the middle of Lake Eufaula and found 3 or 4 places where all these big bass living. And the first day of that tournament, we had a 15 bass limit back in those days. That's what the Alabama state limit was. And I caught 11 bass that day that weighed 52 pounds and 8 ounces or 9 ounces, something like that. I had an 810, an 814, and a 9.3 on the same stringer. I got my line broken 4 times. I only had 11 bass. I should have had another 25 pounds. Got my line broken 3 times. I should have caught 14 that weighed about 75 or 80. But and I was telling everybody about these jelly worms. This is strawberry worm. This is a grape worm. This is a licorice worm.
There you go.
And all of that. And I was telling, and Tom Mann, through giving me a handful of worms and me getting a lead in that tournament, sold jillions of them. And the promotion and the marketing is really, really important. And the thing that I'd recommend to the young guys trying to get involved in this business is get a good education.
Yes.
Get a good education, and you need to get your education. Don't do it in African plant science or something like that. Well, that might not be bad,
Sure.
But don't do it in African neurological studies or something like that. I don't know. Get you a good degree in some sort of business, marketing, speech, anything that's got to do with business, because if you got that, you could get a job everywhere, anywhere. And if you can't get a job, you can figure out something to sell and sell it. Get you a good college education. When you look at some of the early great tournament fishermen, like my buddy Roland Martin as example, went to the University of Maryland. Ricky Clunn, who's fishing his 50th year. And I think he's the only guy that's made it to 50. I fished 54 years. If Ricky makes it to 54, I'm going to go back and fish with him. Yeah. I'm going to go back and fish bass again if he makes it to 54. I might do it anyway. Run it up to 60 or something. But anyway, get you a good degree. Get you a good college degree. And the early guy, Ricky Clunn, by the way, was a chemist. No, Ricky Clunn was not a chemist. I can't remember but Ricky Green was a chemist. He got a college education. Ricky Clunn, all of the early tournament fishermen, many of the tournament fishermen now have college education because they start fishing on high school and college bass fishing teams. They get and if they had it in my college, I'd have like 100 degrees from the University of Oklahoma right now. I'd be like doctorate in about everything. I'd still be there fishing on that team. They might even let me coach it now. Is that guy your coach? No, he's still on the team. He's a senior. Student graduate,
So with that earlier in your career, I mean, like your brand and your image is unmistakable, right? You got the hair, the sunglasses, you got the giggle, all that. Like early in your career, did you ever look in the mirror every morning and say, okay, this is my brand, this is my image, let's just run with that? Or was it all natural?
It's a little bit of both, Chris. And what a great question, because a lot of that's intentional. I mean, it really is. Sure. And some of it's accidental, and it all worked out. But when I started, Bill Dance had been on television for 3 years or 4 years. Roland Martin had been on 2. I actually got a hold of, neither one of them knew it, but I had some connections. and Roland lived here in Broken Arrow, Oklahoma, is where Roland lived. But I got a hold of all of the television shows that Roland Martin had done for 2 years. And I got a hold of all the television shows that Bill Dance. I didn't get them from them. Those guys wouldn't ever give them to me. They probably didn't even have them.
Yeah.
But I got a hold of them, and I watched those shows for hours on end. I watched them till I was, and both these guys were a friend of mine, but I watched them till I was sick of watching Roland Martin say, son. And I got tired of looking at that hat that said turd or whatever that T stands for on that hat. I don't know what that, touchdown. I don't know what it stands for. No, I know what it stands for. Yeah, but I'm an Oklahoma University guy, but my second college that I love in the entire country is the University of Tennessee. Not because of Bill, because of Philip Fulmer, who won the national championships, a real good fishing buddy of mine. Bill Dance would never take Philip Fulmer fishing. Bill don't know nothing about football. And I don't know if he's ever set foot on the University of Tennessee. But that hat was Bill Dance. Iconic. And it still is. It's an iconic icon of bass fishing, period, not just Bill Dance. And I watched those shows, and I tried to emulate as just a fishing fan, which I'm still a big fan of those two guys. I mean, I love them to death, and I've learned more about catching bass from Roland Martin than even maybe more than my dad, who taught me a lot about it. But Roland knew more about it than my dad did. And but I tried to emulate the things that those guys were doing right as a fishing fan, which that's what I was. I still am. And try to emulate what they were doing right, and try to avoid what I thought as a fan they were doing wrong. And but those were iconic things that those guys started doing. And I started kissing fish accidentally.
Yeah,
that became I've got thousands and thousands of pictures every year of people kissing fish. I got a picture of Vladimir Putin kissing a fish.
Do you really?
Got in the mail from me. And I want to tell you right now, I have not conferred with Vladimir Putin about anything. I have no relationship with him. I do not know the man, so don't start any bad rumors. Yeah. But Vladimir Putin in Russia kissing a fish.
Wow.
The fish had big teeth in it.
Yeah.
He's crazy man. But anyway, the laugh, as you mentioned, the laugh was accidental. That's just the way I laugh. And as a matter of fact, when we did our pilot show to see if we were going to go ahead and be able to do television shows, we had a production company here in Tulsa produce that very first pilot show. And Chris and I come up to go through and watch the first deal and make suggestions or recommendations of any changes we wanted to see. Chris and I was walking down a hallway in this production studio, and the guy was about 3 or 4 offices down, had my show on some monitors there. And they audio guys run the audio up real loud. They listen to that stuff real loud.
Right.
Yeah, old audio guys can't hear nothing because they've been listening to everything real loud. And he had it turned up, cranked up all the way. And we got about 4 or 5 offices away, and I laughed on that video. It was video. We used video, not film.
Tape, right.
Yeah, Roland used film when he started, but we used video. And but I heard that laugh, and my wife turned around to me. And she said, "Oh, that's the most horrible thing in the world." I said, "Well, it's the way I laugh." And she said, "You can't do that on television." She said, "They will run you off television.
Wow.
The first 6 weeks you have the show on the air." She was wrong.
It's your brand. It's your signature.
And I want to add that was maybe one of the few times that she's been wrong in 60 years of marriage.
I understand.
What about your sunglasses? Is that part of the persona?
You know, we've always worn sunglasses fishing, and we actually we've been doing this show, our television show, for 47 years. This is year number 47. We're on ESPN2 every Saturday morning at here in Oklahoma, 6:30 Central Time, 7:30 Eastern Time. We're on about 12 other networks now, including the Discovery Channel and Pursuit and AT&T Sports Southwest, all kinds of channels. And but we started wearing sunglasses in the very early times of fishing. The original sunglasses for fishermen was developed by Polaroid, the people that made. Many of y'all don't know what a Polaroid is, but we used to have a camera that you took a picture with, and it spit out a little blank page of that picture.
Shake it. Yeah.
And you watch it, and the picture come alive on there. It was magic. It was magic. Some of the kids are going, "What in the world is he talking about now?" But it was magic, a Polaroid. Polaroid invented a Polaroid process they could do for a pair of sunglasses that you could look into the water, and it would cut the glare off. So you could see down into the water. You could see a stump or a log or a fish down in the water. And so when they invented those Polaroid glasses, I was somewhere and somebody was telling me about me. I said, "I got to buy Polaroid." They were glass lenses. They weren't plastic like they are now, glass lenses. And I got a hold of some. And so I made a deal with them to have Jimmy Houston Polaroid sunglasses.
Wow.
And we sold literally hundreds of thousands of pairs of those sunglasses every year. And we actually built an entire catalog, about 100-page catalog of fishing tackle with those sunglasses as the main point. And my buddy Johnny Morris bought our catalog business out, and I started promoting Bass Pro Shop and Tracker boats. Same time I was running Ranger boats, Ranger fiberglass and Tracker aluminum, which I've run Ranger since 1968. My first Ranger boat was a 1969 model.
Wow.
I met Forrest and Nine at that tournament, Eufaula, Alabama. Forrest talked me into buying one of those things. I couldn't afford it, just like I can't afford them now, but I still buy them. And I've had probably 50 or 60 Rangers in my lifetime. I don't know how many. But anyway, I had those Polaroid sunglasses. We sold them on our television shows, and we would sell thousands of pairs every month. And we're selling for $12.95. Glass lens, and they were unbreakable. They could get hit with a bullet weight, a slip seeker, or a spinner bait, and I got to know how many people would send them back to me, and they'd say, a seeker hit this and shattered them, kept from putting my eye out, or a spinner bait kept from putting my eye out. We'd send them a new pair of sunglasses, of course. But that's how that started. And that's how Polaroid, when they were the only ones that made them. They had a patent on it. When the patent run out, other people started making them. They couldn't call them Polaroid, so they call them polarized. And that's what, like these solar bats I have on right now. And but I would wear them all the time outside. And like most of us now, if we go outside without our shoes on, we can't hardly walk across concrete, let alone gravel. Sure. And yet we all grew up, well, I don't know if the kids do nowadays, but we grew up as kids running around barefoot until we were about 15 years old. Some of us didn't have any shoes to wear. We'd maybe get a pair when school started, but we outgrew them by the next year, so we wouldn't get another pair until school started again. And so we run around barefoot all summer. We run on rocks, briars, it didn't matter. In Oklahoma, we have a sticker they call a goat head. Yeah, you barefoot don't help you with a goat head.
My dogs get them all.
You don't help you with the goat head. But we could run around on gravel and everything. And now, since we all wear shoes all the time, we can't walk around on that stuff. Well, I was the same way with the sunglasses. I fish so much that I just wear these sunglasses all the time. So to this day, I would go out there today in the sunshine. I couldn't see. I just had to be squinting and stuff. But I'll tell you right now, I do not wear them to bed. I have, but I don't do that.
That's awesome. You talk about, you've ran over, 50 different models of Ranger boats. I mean, you had your first Ranger boat in late 60s, you say, with all these beautiful Rangers on display here and for sale, by the way. What has been the single most innovative design or thing in particular, going back decades or however long? What is the single most innovative thing that you've seen in a Ranger boat?
Well, two of them. One of them is a safety standpoint, and the other.
What's that? What's a safety standpoint?
Well, the fact that the boats don't turn over. If you happen to fill them full of water, they will not sink
because they're foam.
The foam built into the boat, and they've got. I don't know if they got one here, but they often have a cutaway of a Ranger boat. They have it here.
Yep.
A cutaway where you can look what is inside of all that pretty fiberglass.
Yep.
You can look inside of it and see most boats will sink. They will sink. And I've come close to losing my life on the water.
Wow.
Many, many times. When I was 16 years old, I sunk a boat, and the only thing that saved me, it was not a bass boat. It was I bass fished with it, but it was an aluminum Texas-made runabout boat. I had it painted bright red, and I put a picture of that little devil on it, the Little Devil cartoon called Little Devil.
Yep.
I named that boat Little Devil, and I water skied all the time. I water skied in tournaments and stuff, but I fished out of that boat also, and I ran trot line out of it, and I put it in the water one night in February on Lake Tenkiller. And to go bait a trot line because I'd had this boat painted and been gone. I need to put the trot line out so I can catch fish. And a buddy of mine, we did not put the drain plug back in it.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, only time in my life I've ever done that.
Oh, sure.
I apologize for that, Lord.
Sure. Yeah.
But it was just a joke. It's just a joke. But the boat filled full of water and turned over and would have sunk to the bottom, and we would have died. Almost died anyway. We were very, very fortunate.
And cold.
It's in the middle of the night.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was in the middle of the night. And we were a long way from shoreline, no way we could afford. But the air got in the front of that boat because it was a ski boat and held the nose up. We stuck our fingers in the in the bow eye, and somebody luckily heard us screaming. It was dead calm over in a cabin, and come out and rescue us. We were just about dead when they got us, but saved us. If we hadn't been kids, we were 16 years old, and so it took a lot to kill us. We're bulletproof.
Oh yeah.
And but most boats will sink. The only reason that didn't had enough air in that bow, enclosed bow, to keep the boat from sinking. That's all. That all said. But that boat won't sink. It can fill it full of water. It's not going to turn over. So that's safety a deal that Ranger did. And my original Ranger I bought didn't have that. That was the innovation that came along. And the other thing is live wells.
Yep.
Live wells. Live wells have saved the life of literally millions of bass. And I know, just like a paramedic, all patients eventually die. All bass eventually die. But the ones that enjoy it the most are the ones that die from old age and not from fillet.
Sure.
I'm just telling you that. I know a lot of bass on a first-name basis. I mean, I've kissed a bunch of them. I haven't kissed nearly enough, but I've kissed a bunch of them. And they would rather die of old age. I'm just telling you that. But that live well, and then putting aeration in that live well, now we have oxygen going into that live well. It's a tremendous innovation.
Hey, Jimmy, I've seen you. We go down to OHIV every now and then, and you've been down there a few times.
Yeah, we
Buddy,
fished Ivy before anybody ever heard of Ivy a long time ago. And it was spitting out 10-pound bass many years ago.
Before the forward-facing thing.
Way before forward-facing sonar.
Yeah.
What do you think about the forward-facing sonar? Because you go out with Josh some.
I fished with my buddy Josh Jones down there, and actually, I don't even know. It's 3 or 4 or 5 years ago. When Josh and I was first fishing that lake, we would go down there and there would be like 4 or 5 or 6 boat trailers and pickups at the ramp. And 2 of those trucks would be Josh's and mine.
Yep.
And I don't know if Josh will own up to this story or he would tell, but Josh actually was going down to going down to Texas to fish, and he called me. And he said, Jimmy, he said, can you come down and fish with me tomorrow? And I said, where are you fishing? And he said, well, I was on my way to Coleman, and my buddy Ben Milliken called me. And a guy with Ben Milliken, Ben's buddy, and I know him too, just caught a bass that weighed like 15 or 16 pounds at OHIV. He said, you ever heard of OHIV? And I said, oh, yeah, I fished it half a dozen times. I got a buddy that lives down there, and it spit out a lot of big fish. But I said, it got a bunch of algae in the water column, and nobody's fished it the last 4 or 5 years that I know of. And he said, well, Milliken's down there, and he said, they just caught a 16-pound bass. I said, so you're on your way down there? He said, yeah, but I was going down to fish Coleman, which is a lake close by there. It's got big bass. Oh, Josh's going to kill me. I told you that.
That's all right, yeah. Coleman.
and don't forget that name, Lake Coleman, right there close to.
And you keep mentioning it.
I just don't remember that name. But Josh was on his way to Coleman when Ben called him. And actually, and I told him, I said, I can't go tomorrow. The next day I'm working, but I can come down there Saturday. And he said, well, get your fanny on down there. He said, nobody's fishing down there. I said, that lake had 10-pound bass in it years ago.
Yep.
And Josh was driving down there. This was like 9 or 10 o'clock in the morning. And when he called me, and I actually met Josh many years ago. He bought a Labrador puppy from me. Him and his wife came down to the ranch, and we started crappie fishing together. And he's an incredible crappie fisherman.
Yes.
And obviously an incredible bass fisherman. But I went down there that weekend, and there was like his truck, my truck, and about 3 other trucks at the ramp. But Josh called me back later that day. Think about this, how good OHIV was and still is.
Yeah.
I got a buddy of mine here at the show, Larry Walker's, caught 2 over 13 pounds within the last week. He caught a 13-something with Kyle Hall, another buddy of mine down there, and he caught a 13-something 2 or 3 days ago with Josh. But Josh called me before the sun set that day, so he sent me a picture first. Yeah, sent me a picture. I sent him a text back. How big is that? It's 11-something. He'd been on the lake an hour and caught 11-pounder.
Wow.
11-pounder. That pretty much sums up forward-facing sonar right there.
I was going to say, that's not just going down the bank and slow rolling a spinnerbait just out of sight like you've taught us. Yeah.
And Josh has caught 2 over 15 there. They catch more Sher Lunkers in Texas out of that lake than they can even they allow. They've got parameters set up of how many, and a Sher Lunker is a bass over 13 pounds. we've worked really, really hard to try to get Oklahoma to set up some sort of a similar deal. Josh and I have. And one of, and I don't know the guy's name, thankfully, but one of the biologists we have here in the state of Oklahoma, sitting in a meeting right around a table talking about trying to establish a Sher Lunker program in the state. My state, the state of Oklahoma, for crying out loud, and one of the biologists said, well, he said, in our opinion, the Sher Lunker program does not work. And another biologist said, well, by golly, I think it does. So, but I cannot imagine anybody in the world, even if you don't know anything about bass fishing, and particularly a biologist that's supposed to probably knows way more than you and me put together,
Sure.
might not be able to catch them as good as we can,
Sure.
but he knows a lot more about them from a biology standpoint. The Sher Lunker program has probably been the most successful thing to ever happen to bass fishing in history in the world. I mean, maybe the only thing that could top it is catch and release.
Sure.
That Ray Scott and Forrest Wood started. Ray Scott wanted to do the catch and release. Forrest Wood developed the live well to make that happen, and make it a reality. But the Sher Lunker program, if you catch a bass over 13 pounds, you can put it in the Sher Lunker program. They take the fish to the hatchery at Athens, Texas.
Yep.
And I had a ranch down there right beside that. I've spent a lot of time at that hatchery. It's remarkable. And they hatch those eggs out, and then they turn fingerlings loose back in the same lakes that those fish come out of. And they got them all over Texas. And now you have a lake that produces more over 13 pounds every year. There's 200 boats on that lake right now, I can tell you.
Yep.
I can tell you. And this, within the last week, I know another guy with Josh caught a 14-pounder this week. A guy with Kyle Hall caught one over 15. This week.
Yep.
This week. Our state record in Oklahoma is a little over 15 pounds. One fish's been caught like that. And I'm not even going to tell you the lake. You'll have to look that up on your own. I've been thinking maybe there's another one swimming around in there that big.
And of course, that
if I ever see that rascal. Let me tell you, Josh Jones and I one day on OHIV saw a fish that had to weigh 17 or 18 or 19 pounds. Very definitely a largemouth bass, the biggest bass we've ever seen on a live scope, on a Garmin live scope. And the fish was over trees about 30 feet deep, big giant pecan trees, drawing them out like the fish was over the top of them, only about 8 or 10 foot deep, and just barely moving, just barely swimming. We're both in the front of the boat. Both of us have an A-rig on. We fire out there at that fish. Both baits come over the top of the fish. The fish commits suicide on Josh's umbrella rig. Just pow. He sets a hook and missed it.
Oof.
He goes to his knees. He's going, oh, my God, well, why did I do it? And I'm going, he's still there. And I make about 2 more throws before he's praying or crying or cussing or something in the bottom of the boat. He's still there, Josh. He's still there. He's still there. And I make 2 or 3 more casts. And about the third cast, Josh finally gets up and tries to make another cast, but he's shaking so bad he misses it by 10 foot. And the bass run right at my bait, and my heart like it's quit beating. It just stopped still for a minute, and he run right up there and never touched them and turned and went straight to the bottom like you dropped a rock. And that bass is still there if she hadn't died of old age.
Wow.
Might be over 22 pounds. She probably weighed 17 or 18 pounds. So, there's we have a lot of bass over 10 pounds swimming around in Oklahoma Lake. So the lake that I live on down there, I live just south of there, Lake Arbuckle. They caught a 13-something out of it this year. And so there's more bass in the state of Oklahoma that can break that state record. And if I have any goals or a bucket list, I don't have a bucket list about anything. I've done about everything in my life I love to do. I'd love to catch the Oklahoma state record.
Yeah.
I just like to do that, and I just so all my buddies would go, dadgummit.
Would you? So when you were first introduced to the
Chris,
forward-facing sonar thing,
You got to wrap it up.
when you were first introduced to the forward-facing sonar thing, were you very receptive to it, or were you like, well, I'm an old school guy, I'm going to stick to my spinnerbait? And did it take a guy like a specialist like Josh Jones to actually, push you over the edge with this technology?
No, the first time I saw it, I thought, oh my God, I'll catch them all now.
Yeah, yeah. And
Now,
we are.
Let me tell you, let me tell you, we got to wrap this up, as Trait said, but let me tell you, when Carl Lawrence, right here in Tulsa, Oklahoma, Daryl Lawrence's daddy, when Carl developed the little green box, some of y'all are old enough to remember that, a little green box, and we could put something called a transducer over the side of the boat and tell how deep the water was. The only way I could tell how deep the water was to stick a 5.5 or 6 foot rod in the water, and if it didn't touch the bottom, it was over 6 foot. That's all I knew. And sometimes I would use a big old long cane pole, a cane pole we used to catch bluegill and crappie with, to see if the water was over 10 foot deep, to try to find drop-offs and ledges to fish on Lake Tenkiller before he even had a locator. When he developed the little green box, I told my daddy, I said, I got to have one. I saved up the money, and I've been working since I was 10, 11, 12 years old, saving money to buy stuff. For 10, 11, 12 years old was to buy a pickup truck. But anyway, but I told my daddy, I said, I got to have one of those. And he said, those things are like $80 or $90. Yeah, that's a lot of money. I was working for less than $1 an hour. I said, I got to have one. And I got that little green box, and I went out on the lake, and I come back in. I told my daddy, I said, I'll catch every fish out there. Yeah. I'll catch them all. I can tell how deep the water is. I said, I can tell if it drops from 12 to 20 foot. I said, I'll catch every fish in the lake. My dad said, no, you won't. And he told me that several times throughout the years as those got better and better, and we fastened them on a boat and could idle around the lake. And when he did that, I said, now I can find everything. I'll catch every fish in the lake. And my daddy said, no, you won't. With a forward-facing sonar, no, you won't.
No.
That 17-pounder, 18, 19, however big it is now, still swimming around in OHIV. If it didn't die of old age.
And it shows you a lot.
No, you won't.
A lot. No, that's good.
No, I love the live scope from day one.
Oh,
I love the little green box from day one. And I run 2 live scopes on my boat. I run one on the trolling motor and one on the turret. I use a right height turret. And I use the one on the boat to search on a trolling motor because you can move it back and forth. On a right height turret, if you could buy a turret, put one on a turret, get the faster motor of the two. The faster you can turn it, the better. But if you're fishing brush piles and stuff, you put your boat on spot lock, which is a power pole that works in over 10 foot of water and over 12 foot of water. Yep. That's what spot lock is on your trolling motor. If you do that, you need one on a turret where you can stay on that fish or stay on that brush pile because your trolling motor is going to continue to work. And I know guys that use more than 2, as a matter of fact. You definitely need 2 of those live scope transducers down there. And put one of them on that right height turret. And that way you can really stay on them. That trolling motor can do what it's saying, whatever it wants, keep you on that spot. And if you're fishing for crappie or fishing a brush pile, most of the time the crappie won't move, the brush pile won't move. If you're fishing for a big bass, that sucker's moving. They're moving.
I mean, look at the tank behind us. Let's see. I mean, there's many laps that they do. They do the same thing out there in the field. So
that's a good deal. I never thought about that, the fish in a tank.
Yeah.
But you watch some of the other fish, like a catfish, might lay there all day and not move anywhere.
Yep.
Thankfully, those catfish aren't swimming around much, but they do. I mean, you see catfish with the scope. But one of the more difficult things to do, honestly, is to tell a catfish from a bass about the same size.
Correct.
Now, if you see a 20-pound catfish, you can tell pretty easily. And I've never seen a 20-pound bass. I might have. That one Josh and I was after might have been. But if you see a 7 or 8 pound bass or a 7 or 8 pound catfish, they're pretty difficult.
Yeah.
They're pretty difficult. And if you get closer, if you run your scope in closer, you can tell what they are a little bit better. But most of us like to look out there at least 40 or 50 feet. Some guys look a lot further than that. The crappie guys are all looking 15 feet. That baby draws that crappie out pretty good. And it says, got a big C in the middle of it. Identify it's a crappie, not a carp.
That's awesome.
No, that's not true.
Well, Jimmy, you said a lot.
Thank you, Chris.
Yeah, you said a lot, and we're getting the 5 minutes here. There's a lot of aspiring professional bass fishermen out there, aspiring doctors, lawyers out here, perhaps. Can you give us some basic life advice? You're a very successful man. I mean, your laugh and your whole image is very contagious. Can you give us and leave us with some basic life advice as we part ways here?
Well, let me tell you one thing. I think an education is really tantamount. And nowadays, a lot of kids are getting college educations in things that don't mean anything. Get college educations in things that will help you every day in life. And the other thing that I'd suggest, I'm a saved, born-again Christian. I got saved when I was 12 years old. I was raised in a Baptist church. And you're going to have situations that happen in your life that will test everything and anything that you know about life or how to get along with it. Most of you girls are going to get married. Most of you guys are going to get married. God had a good sense of humor. He put a pretty big challenge on us right there.
Yeah.
I've been married to the same woman over 60 years, and having a deep, strong relationship with Jesus Christ, being able to talk to God on a daily basis. One of the great things that God does when he saves you, if you're 12 years old or if you're 82 years old or 85 years old, when you get saved, is he puts his spirit right inside of you. So that's how you can talk to God. God's listening. God will talk back to you on an every single day basis. And let me tell you something. I got friends like I mentioned, Roland Martin and Bill Dance, and I kid that I watched those shows when I was a kid. I was still a kid when I was watching those shows, but I wasn't 12 years old or anything. I was a little bit older, but I was still a kid. But as you go through life, you're going to have lots and lots of things happen. You're going to be in situations where you have no hope. And your only hope will be in Jesus. So that strong relationship that you have will mean everything to you. And one time in my life, I had a situation. I won't go through the situation. It's pretty interesting, but I won't go through it for time. But God told me that I had another 25 years to live. Well, I ciphered it up real quickly, and it said that I was going to live to be 95 years old. So I'll just end this thing and tell you, if somebody ever tells you, did you hear Jimmy Houston died? First question you ask them was, how old was he? And if they say like 92, you just say, boy, that comes as a surprise to him. That's because I believe what God said. Now, when I get to be 92, I'm going to be like King Hezekiah and start asking God to give me 15 more years. So if you hear that I'm 97 and still alive, it's 110. That's 95 plus 15. For some of you that can't cipher. These guys like Chris, they're worried about ciphering up to 5. That's all they care about. Once we get to 5, we're home free.
Well, Mr. Jimmy Houston, you're an absolute legend. We enjoyed the cast episodes with you here, and continue to do what you do. We all love you as fans and fans of the sport overall. Just a reminder, his Ranger 520R or 521R? Which one?
I run a 521R.
521R. There are some on display here. Hop in them, open up some lids, check them out. Some of those features he talked about earlier are all here on display. Amazing machines. Amazing machines.
That's one thing I never thought that we would have equipment to fish like that we have now. Equipment like we've been talking to, Mercury motors, Ranger boats, trolling motors, turrets, forward-facing sonar, hooks that somebody else already sharpened for us chemically. You don't even have to sharpen our hooks, although we still do, by the way. We put a little extra on what comes out of the package. But they should be really sharp, but $1 or $2 a piece, really.
Yeah.
Well, thank you, Jimmy. We appreciate you coming out today.
Thank y'all so much. Y'all have a great time here. You're in the best city in the world for bass fishing, Tulsa, Oklahoma.
Thank you, Jimmy Houston. Appreciate you.
We got the music going again. I like the music.
Thank you, Jimmy.
Y'all doing a wonderful job, by the way. Doing a great job.